This is question 20 of the KCSE 2025 Mathematics Paper 1. Sincerely speaking, this question looks like a novel, and actually, to make it worse, it contains very heavy numbers that would actually make someone to be scared. But I want you to just relax like that, because we are going to do some justice to this question, because we are going to crush these numbers and simplify this question just in 3 lines, which will actually make it look like the easiest question you've ever solved of this nature. So just walk along with me as I show you how to take all these 10 marks that do come with this question. So we are told that a transporter was contracted to transport 133 tons of sand from site A to site B. And then the transporter used 2 lorries, a 7-ton lorry and a 14-ton lorry. The transport incurred a cost of shillings 3,000 per trip for the 7-ton lorry and shillings 4,000 per trip for the 14-ton lorry. The total cost incurred by the transporter was a shillings 47,000. And then for part A, we are told that given the 7-ton lorry made X trips while the 14-ton lorry made Y trips, write down 2 equations to represent the information. So that is part A. Yeah, it's always good to have a picture of what else is required. These are something that you're supposed to solve using the matrix method, that is 5 marks. And for the other part over here, there are some details that we are given, and then it tells us to calculate the amount of profit. So this is 3 marks. Here, this is 5 marks and 2 marks. So with that picture in mind, let's just get into part A and do some justice into it. So all this information, you'll be surprised that we can just be able to simplify all these in just 3 lines. Why? Because the information that you are given is involving this 7-ton lorry and a 14-ton lorry. So that's something that is of key interest to us, and that is the 7-ton lorry and this one 14-ton lorry. And is there anything that you are told? The thing that you are told about this is the trips they made and hotels and the costs per trip. You see how simple this is, because what we really need to know is the trips made and costs per trip. Only these, and we'll be able to form some equations. So for the 7-ton, how many trips did this lorry make? We are told that given the 7-ton lorry made X trips, so that's X, and the 14-ton lorry made Y trips, so this is Y. What else? We are told that the cost, or rather the transporter, incurred a cost of shillings 3,000 per trip. So this is 3,000 per trip for the 7-ton lorry. So here what you have is 3,000, and here that's for the 7-ton lorry, and a shillings 4,000 per trip for the 14-ton lorry. So what you have here is 4,000. This is exactly what you are really supposed to know. You see how wonderful it is to have a pictorial format of something, because it gets to simplify something, and it makes it look a bit much easier, and also at the same time it's a good point of reference like that. So we have the trips, and also we have the cost per trip. So that implies that if this lorry is making X trips and each trip is taking 7 tons, therefore the total tons that this lorry is going to make is 7 multiplied by X, that is 7X. I'll show you where this is taking us to. And for this one, if every trip is carrying 14 tons, therefore that implies that the total tons, or rather the total weight that this lorry is going to take, is 14 multiplied by the number of trips, which is 14y. Great. So we need to know, have we been given the total mass to be carried? Let's get back here. We are told that the transporter was contracted to transport 133 tons. 133 tons. Therefore, the total number of tons should be 133. By that, you've already formed your first equation. See how interesting this is. Let's get to see if we can be able to form any other equation from that. Well, look at this very keenly. We are told something to do with cost, and we are told that the cost per trip is 3,000 and the trips are X. Therefore, that would imply that the total number of, or rather the total cost that has been incurred by this 7 tonner is this cost per trip, which is 3,000 multiplied by the number of trips, and that would be 3,000 X. Therefore, we write it down. Somehow, this sounds a bit odd, getting to work with something that is 3000x, but I'll show you what we'll do with this one. Let's get to this one. This part over here, for the 14-ton lorry, we are told that it made Y trips, and each trip it's incurring a cost of 4,000. Therefore, the total cost incurred by this lorry, it is 4,000 multiplied by Y, and that is 4,000 Y. Yeah, like that. Quite interesting. And we are told that this amount is totaling to a total cost of shillings 47,000 right here with us. Therefore, that is 47,000. So these are the two equations that we get, and actually, the question is telling us to do what? Let's check. Given all that, so I'm avoiding all that. We are told write down two equations to represent the information, and we have our two equations already. But there's something that we've not yet done with these equations. You see, these numbers look very fat, and they look very scaring. So we have to leave them in a format that is a bit much friendly, and a format that is much easier to work with. And the way that we can be able to do that is by getting to simplify these equations. Because you see, 7, 14, 133, they are multiples of 7. Therefore, we can divide by 7, we can divide by 7, and we can divide by 7. Let's see what we get with this. When we divide here by 7, we are going to get x because this 7 cancels with that 7. And then we get a plus here. We retain the plus, and then 14 divided by 7, that's going to give us a 2. And we have a y is equals to 133 divided by 7, that's going to give you a 19. On the other side, we have to find a creative way of simplifying this. And the way that we can be able to do that is by becoming an assassinator to numbers. So we have to kill these zeros. But now mathematically what we'll be doing is not killing them, even though that's the term that you people use. But what we are doing is that we are dividing by multiples of 10. So I would say I'm dividing by 10 to remain with 300. I'm dividing by 10 to remain with 400. I'm divided by 10 to remain with 4700. I divide with a 10 again, I divide with a 10 again, I divide with a 10 again, finally I divide with the last 10 again, I divide with 10 again, and 10 again, and by that you are done with the zeros, and now you remain with a simpler equation, and that is 3x plus 4y is equals to 47. You see now this one is much simpler, and it looks a bit much friendly. So the second equation you get is this one, and also you get this one as the other equation. X plus 2y is equals to 19. And if you just write that, then you should be able to get all your full marks for that particular question. So we've already tested some 2 marks, but now we are also remaining with some chunk of it, some big part of the cake that you've not yet tasted. Let's go ahead and unwrap it together. This is part B of question 20. Remember that this is a KCSE question that was recently tested in paper 1 of the KCSE Mathematics 2025. Part B tells us to use matrix method to solve the equation. Normally when many students see the word matrix using the matrix method, they seem to sweat or get worried a bit. Yeah, but now this is the moment that you now get to master how you are really supposed to work through that step by step. So ensure that you do really follow keenly step by step to ensure that you have really fully mastered this, and I believe that you'll be able to do that. So what we are having here is these two equations, and that is where we start from. We start from these two equations that we have. That is x plus 2y is equals to 19, and we have 3x plus 4y is equals to 47. You can imagine from all this information, we've been able to simplify all these just to this and this, just to two lines. You see how powerful mathematics is and how powerful numbers are. They can simplify like a whole novel into just a simple paragraph. But let's just keep things moving on. So imagine to get all these 5 marks, what we shall use is just these two equations. But somehow you might get tempted to use substitution method because you can take this two to the other side, or even you may be tempted to use the elimination method where you multiply this one by 2 such that you can eliminate 4y here. But if you do that, know that you'll be doing a very terrible mistake, and what you'll be doing is that you'll be inviting errors because you've been told precisely that you're supposed to use the matrix method. So to use the matrix method, the first thing that you do is to establish a matrix that represents this information, and let's go ahead and do that. So a matrix that represents this information, this is exactly what you do. So you pick the coefficients of each and every element that is here. For x, the coefficient of x, since we don't have any other number presiding before x, we simply take it as 1. For 3, that is 3, we have it here, that is the coefficient of x. And we move on. What's the coefficient for y? For y, it is a 2. Therefore, we write a 2 there. The coefficient for this y, it's a 4. Therefore, we write a 4 there. And we put this one under a matrix like that. And then we write the unknowns that we have here, and that is x and y. But now we have to write it in column form, that is x, y. And I really hope that you understand why we do this. If you don't, let me show you why. That's the matrix that we get. You see, the reason that we do this is because this matrix form is exactly equivalent to this equation. Notice that to convert this matrix to this equation, what we normally do is that we multiply row by column. So that would mean that we multiply 1 by x, we get an x. We multiply 2 by y, we get 2y. And then we have is equals to 19. Same case with the second part. The second part we have it as 3 multiplied by x, we get a 3x. 4 multiplied by y, we get a 4y, and then is equals to 47. So it is more of the same thing. So to be able to work out using the matrix method, there are some things that are mandatory that you are really supposed to know. And the first thing that you're really supposed to know is how to find the determinant of a matrix. The determinant of a matrix. If this has really been giving you some challenges, then it shouldn't ever give you a challenge again, because finding the determinant of a matrix, we simply take the first element that appears first here, and that is 1. And then once we take that 1, we multiply it by the number that is exactly at the opposite side of it. We take it diagonally. So if this is 1, we take 4, and we multiply by 4 like that. But this is what we call the main diagonal. So we take the product of main diagonal. The main diagonal is identified by this first element, that is 1 multiplied by 4, and then we minus the product of the remaining diagonal, which is now the secondary diagonal. For this case, it is now 2 times 3. We have it there. How do we get with this? You can go ahead and simplify this fully, because this is 4 minus 6. 4 minus 6, that's supposed to give you minus 2. Be very careful as you work out this, because if you're not careful, you might end up writing 2, and that's incorrect. The value for this is negative 2. So after being able to find the determinant, the second thing that you find is the inverse of the matrix, the inverse of the matrix. And you see, I'm really going step by step, such that everything that you're working out, it is helping us to work out the step that follows. So to find the inverse of a matrix, we usually do 1 divided by the determinant of that matrix. For my case, I'll wish to go directly and fill it in here, but we do 1 divided by the determinant. For our case, the determinant is negative 2. Therefore, we write negative 2 there, and then we multiply by the matrix that we are finding the inverse for. But there's something that we do to this matrix. We transform it. You see what we called the main diagonal, which is 1, 4. We start by interchanging those digits. We just interchange their positions. If this is 1 and this is 4, this 4 is going to move from here to here, and this 1 is going to move from here to here. So it's like these people are exchanging their positions. So what you are going to have is 4 and 1. But now for the remaining elements, we change their sign. This was a positive, therefore it's going to be a negative. This one was a positive, it's going to be a negative, like that. But if this was a negative, we would have written 2. If this was negative 3, we would have written a positive 3. The idea here is that we are changing their signs. Regardless of the sign that they have initially, we have to change the sign that they have. Let's go ahead and simplify this. It's pretty much easier, because what we do here is we multiply 4 by negative a half. Negative a half multiplied by 4. What do you get with this? That's gonna give you a negative 2, like that. What about negative 3 multiplied by negative a half? That's gonna give you see, this is negative and negative, therefore negative disappears. Therefore what you are doing is 3 times a half, and that is 1.5. We can just write it in decimal form to avoid having so many fractions over here. So we have negative a half multiplied by negative 2. That's gonna give you 1, because the negatives are going to disappear. And then we have negative a half multiplied by 1. That's gonna give you negative 0.5, like that. So once we get the inverse, the second thing that we do, notice that this was our step 1, and then we find the determinant, we find the inverse of that matrix, and then finally what we do is that we take this inverse that we got, and we just write it here, negative 2, 1.5. I believe that it is becoming much easier for you. We have negative 0.5. If it seems to be becoming harder, maybe once we are done with all of it, you'll see how simple it was. So this is now the inverse of the matrix. This is the inverse of the matrix. You see, once we have this, it is true to say that this value, it is equivalent to itself. That is very true to say that it is equivalent to itself, which is -2, 1.5, 1, and -0.5. Like that, it is equivalent to itself. It is equivalent to itself. So this is something, this is saying something like 2 is equals to 2, and this is true. 3 is equals to 3. Yeah, any number is equivalent to itself. But now, since we want to find the values of x and y using the determinant method, what we have to do is that we have now to multiply these, what we are having here, with these values that are here. Notice that the whole of these, the whole of the left side is equivalent to the whole of the right side. Therefore, if we multiply these with the value that is here, the inverse, it will be true to say that that one is equivalent to the same inverse multiplied by the value that is on the right side. I hope that you understood that. Possibly when I write it down, you'll be able to understand it much better. So what we do is that we multiply by the values that are on the left side. You see, this is the left side. We multiply by the values that are here in this equation on the left side. This is the equation that we are using. So we multiply by 1, 2, 3, 4. I had actually not noticed that it is following each other, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's interesting. So that implies that this question is like doing 1, 2, 3, 4. Allah, let's move on. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 xy. And then on the right side, remember we said we multiply by the values that are on the right side, which is 1947. These are the days before it was known whether you will ever exist. But let's move on with the question. What you will realize is that for this particular case, this is the inverse of this matrix. And you see, when a matrix is multiplied by the inverse of that matrix, what you usually get is this matrix, which is 1, 0, 0, 1. That's what we usually get. Actually, if you wish, you can verify. Actually, I wish we had more time, but you can verify by doing -2 multiplied by 1, you get -2. And then you do 1 multiplied by 3, that's gonna give you a 3. 3 minus 2, that's 1. Let's go ahead. The same case, once you multiply this matrix with this matrix, you're supposed to get 1, 0, 0, 1, like that. What we call the identity matrix. And that is multiplied by x, y, like that. On the right side, what do we get? On the right side, we do our numbers, we do our thing here. And this is a part that you really need to be a bit keen and careful as you really work out this. Yeah, because if you don't, you are likely to make some errors. So what we take is that we multiply the way that this matrix follows each other, what we call row by column. So it's like someone is running and then they fall down. They run and then they fall down. So that's what we use. This is -2 multiplied by what we have here, 19. And then we have plus 1 times 47. This is 1 multiplied by 47. For the lower part, we have 1.5 times 19. As we solve this question, it will help you to be able to solve any other question that you'll ever get that involves solving equations using matrix. So it's important that we do get to follow all along. So we have 1.5 multiplied by 19, and then we have plus, and then we have -0.5 multiplied by 47. That's the matrix we get over here. We move on. This is the identity matrix. You see, when we multiply this matrix with anything, it doesn't change the value of what you are multiplying with. So if you multiply this with this matrix, it's just going to remain as as xy. Can I explain a bit? Possibly, let me do so. You see, when you take this one, you multiply by x, you are simply going to get x. When you take that x plus 0 multiplied by y, it's like adding x to 0, which just remains to be x. Same case with this one. If we want to get the value for this part, what we do is that we usually pick this value, which is 0, we multiply by x, which is going to give you a 0. So for the lower part, it's you are taking 0 multiplied by x plus 1 multiplied by y, and this is going to give you 0 plus y. You see, it's just going to remain as y, so that doesn't change anything. For this part, you can actually even use your calculator if you wish, but it's actually doable even to some extent without using a calculator, because 19 multiplied by -2, that's supposed to give you -38. So you have 47 minus 38. 47 minus 38. So that's gonna give you a 9, like that. Here you have 19 times 1.5. This is like doing 19 plus 19 over 2. 19 plus 19 over 2. So that is going to give you 9.5. So you have 9.5, and then you add it now to 19, which then should give you 28.5. So you have 28.5, and then you have minus 47 times 0.5. 47 times 0.5, that's gonna give you 23.5. So you are having 23 and 28. 28 minus 23, that's like 8 minus 3. 8 minus 3, that's gonna give you a 5. So you get a 5 there. So finally, you can say that x, just the way that it matches exactly here, you see that x is equivalent to 9 and y is equivalent to 5. And you know what? By just doing that, you have your 5 marks already in your pocket, like that. If you follow all those procedures correctly, like that, you see it was just a simple thing, just working around, playing with numbers as you have some fun, and then you have your 5 marks. But that's not yet done. We still have a piece that we've not taken. We've taken the first piece over here, the second bigger piece over here, but also there's a medium piece of a cake that is here that you really need to work out. This is part C. Part C, we are told the transporter was paid shillings 500 per ton of sand delivered to site B. Calculate the amount of profit made by the transporter. We need to work out this. So the transporter was paid shillings 500 per ton. Oops, have we rubbed the question? Was paid shillings 500 per ton, and we are told calculate the amount of profit. So if this person is going to make profit, there's something that you're really supposed to know. And I saw a lot of students making an error at this point, and I'll explain a bit so that you don't also get to fall on the same trap. We are supposed to know the amount of money that this transporter, or rather the person who is owning these lorries, got, which is quite important, and actually that's the starting point of that. You see, he is paid 500, and this is 500, and this is per ton, This is per ton. And how many tons did our guy transport? Let's see. We had it here. A transporter was contracted to transport 133 tons. So therefore, the amount that this person is going to receive is 500 times 133. And this is where a lot of students made mistake, and I'll show you how that happened. But first things first, we have 500 multiplied by 133. That's gonna give you shillings. 133 times 500, That's gonna give you 66,500. You see, when a lot of students were working out these, when they reached at this point, they felt like, they have now completed because they have already gotten the amount that this person was paid, which is true. This is the amount that was paid. But now, in reference to the question, this is not complete. Why? Because what you're really supposed to calculate is not the amount that the transporter was paid, but what you're really supposed to calculate is this keyword that is here. This word carries a lot of things, the word profit. Therefore, to get the profit, you should be able to calculate the total income, which you've done, and then beyond that, you should also be able to calculate the expenditure of this person, the expenditure, because this is not the profit. This is just the amount that our guy received, but that's not the profit he made. So to be able to find out on the expenditure, you remember in our question we were told, and let's get back to it, that the cost per trip for this 7-ton lorry, he was using 3,000, and for this one it's 4,000. And then we are told that for all those trips, the total cost that this person incurred by the transport was shillings 47,000. So we have to take in account that the expenditure is 47,000. And actually, to test if you actually did the correct thing as you worked out this question, you can actually take this is 3,000, the cost per trip, and then you multiply by x. What was x? X is the number of trips made. So let's do 3,000 multiplied by 9. We write it here. That is 3,000. Yeah, 3,000 multiplied by 9. This is actually a good way to confirm if you actually worked out the question correctly. 3,000 multiplied by 9, and then you add, I believe the other one was 4,000. Yeah, 4,000. It's right here, this one 4,000, and then we are multiplying that by now 5, which is the number of trips for the 14-ton. 4,000 multiplied by 5. 4,000 multiplied by 5. See if this is going to give you 47,000. If it gives you 47,000, then that implies that the value for x and y that you got in this particular case are correct. If you don't get it as 47,000, then that implies that you are likely to have made a mistake along the way. But I believe that we did the correct thing. So let's go ahead and just confirm. And this is the juicy part and the wonderful thing about mathematics, that you can always be able to confirm whether you did the right thing. We have 9 times 3, that's 27, and then this 1,000, and then we have plus 5 times 4, that's 20, and then we have these 3 zeros. So 27 plus 20, that's 47. Oh, amazing. Yeah, that confirms that we really did the right thing, and actually you should really appreciate yourself for following along and doing the correct thing. But now we are not done with this part. What you're really supposed to do is to find the profit. Therefore, we say that profit should be equivalent to income minus expenditure. And that will be equivalent to 66,500 minus 47,000. What do we get with this 66,500? This is like 66 minus 47. That's 19. Yeah, 19. And this is 500 minus 000. That's 500. And this is in Kenya shillings, 19,500. And that is the exact required solution for this part, and that is how you are really supposed to go about this question. A very wonderful question that has given us a lot of practice in terms of getting to form equations, in how we are really supposed to solve equations using the matrix method. And also, in addition to that, it has also helped us to revise and to see how important it is to be keen as we solve questions, and to be able to answer the exact required question without leaving it along the way. So that is it. Ensure that you continue following all along in all the proceedings and in all the questions that we get to post here, because they are there to help you in terms of building the mathematics ability, in terms of building creativity, and also in terms of becoming better and better in mathematics and beyond. Bye bye. Keep watching, keep following.